morning. Good morning to everybody, both who are watching us streaming and those who are in the main hall. We're going to this morning finish up with our last teaching, Out of Dry Places. We're finally come to the end of this book that we have been in for quite some time, dealing with Walking Wounded. Walking Wounded is the last chapter of the book Out of Dry Places, and we have come to this moment now where we can read the final conclusion of a book that oftentimes find the body of Christ needing much, much care and much, much attention when it comes to those of us who live in the church, hurt, wounded, frustrated, and the like. We find ourselves not being able to receive, no matter what we set ourselves to do. We carry offenses from generations, from last year, last month, last week, yesterday. And we take it into everything that we do. We wear it as a badge on our person, and we go from place to place wounded. What I've attempted to do in these teachings is to lay out a clear argument for how damaging and devastating it is for those who call themselves Christians, those who say they are believers, those who say they love the Lord, those who say they are mature in God. Every time it comes to where life presents challenges to them, then they begin to appeal to the yoke of the flesh. And the flesh has a way of not releasing our self-righteous spirits, such that through our self-righteousness we continue to promote our own thoughts and our own angers and our own resentments and our own bitternesses, because we believe we have been hurt or wounded unfairly. Life can be very, very unfair, but God still requires those who are of the body of Christ to be fair, to walk in justice, to walk according to the cord of righteousness, to make sure just because something is done unto you, it does not mean that you have to allow that to control your life and begin to put up obstacles and barriers and walls where you are not able to receive those good things that are necessary for you. We're living in a world of many challenges, and for those of us who say we are of the mature of God, then the world makes no apologies for its insults, for its offenses, for its accusations. It makes no apologies for how it attempts to buffet our lives. And this is why our faith, our love, our determination, our compassion, our cause for Christ becomes so valuable to those of us who say we are not going to walk wounded. We are not going to allow ourselves to go from place to place to place, exacting our emotions into environments that oftentimes do not understand where we are, that oftentimes are not the doing of those environments, and yet we carry ourselves into various groupings, various places, and many times when we sit amongst those who are mature and discerning, we're able to readily discern that there are things that are going on with those who are in their midst that has no bearing on the moment or the cause for which they have gathered. Yet it seems to be barriers and buffers that those who have the responsibility of imparting wisdom and knowledge into the hearts and minds of people, they see those barriers, and those barriers are no more than the fabrications of the walking wounded. We have been able to say that wounded people, they become wounded through offenses. We said an offense is likened unto a demonic spirit. It desires to find someone that would carry that offense. And once a person says, I will become a carrier to the offense, then it begins the saga of the walking wounded. The walking wounded, the first manifestation of the walking wounded is hurt. Hurt becomes very, very prominent. It becomes something that we wear in our thoughts. We wear it as if it talks to us day and night. We don't even have to be in the occasion or in the environment or even at the time of the event. Hurt seems to be that post-traumatic episode that once something happens, hurt wants to keep talking to you. It wants to keep telling you. It wants to keep promoting your flesh. It wants to keep you absorbed. It wants to keep you giving attention to it. It wants you to become self-justified. It wants you to walk in self-righteousness. It wants you to begin to just get to that place where hurt is no longer hurt. It wants to tip you over into a sphere of becoming angry. Angry is something that manifests from within to without. Anger is always the ownership of the angry. We can never put anger on someone who offended us. Anger is what we would consider to be, if it's a second level manifestation, it manifests in the hearts of those who have been hurt. And the hurt comes from some known or unknown offense that has been committed against the hurt. And the hurt carries that until it becomes anger. Anger is a mental experience. You don't have to become of an outburst. You don't have to give any signs of being angered, but yet anger is something that it speaks to you. It never lets you rest. You can't sleep. You wake up. That's the first thing that's on your mind. It tends to haunt you. It takes you into its own cauldrons, and it wants to tell you more and more of that unlawful exacting up against you or your person. And it keeps driving and it keeps driving until those thoughts are just full of anger, and you can't go into places without the right demeanor. You can't go to work. You can't come to church. You can't even go home if the home is the product of the anger. And you find yourself becoming preoccupied with self-righteous thoughts. You begin to look for the offender, even though the offender is nowhere around you. You look for the offender sometimes by avoiding the individual or avoiding the place. You look for the offender by actually attempting to go and confront them by some doing or another. You call them, you visit them, you believe that your anger has the right to correct a wrong that's been committed against you. And the walking wounded continues to believe that they do not have to get attention for their wounds. They just continually walk after those things that are speaking to their inner person. Ultimately, the walking wounded who has become offended, now they're hurt, now they're going into fits of anger. They then become very resentful people. They walk with the spirit of resentment. They are always contemplating how to quietly get back at an individual. How they do it can be done through a number of means and measures. They no longer remain faithful to their marriage or their workplace or their church or their friendships, because they find themselves seeking to show that I resent you. They no longer find themselves committed and devoted. They no longer walk in agreement. Those agreements become broken, even if it's in a silent way. Resentful people are at a full-blown stage mentally, where their mind becomes consumed with that offense to the degree that in the stage of resentment, they now become the offender. They now become the one who says, I'm going to get you back. I'm going to violate you. The person who walks with resentment, they now become a tool. They become now used by this demonic force or this demonic spirit that started with an offense, and now it's at a place of resentment. And resentment is now what they carry. They become a carrier of exacting a revengeful type experience against either a person, a place. They begin to do all that they can do to sabotage. They no longer believe that what they are doing is wrong. They feel that they have a right to commit this particular act because of what they believe has been committed against them. By the time you go through hurt, anger, and resentment, your mind now becomes conformed to this offense in such a way that psychologically it starts to control the walking wounded. The walking wounded doesn't even think logical. It cannot even believe any longer that what is good for them is good for them. And all they can see is what they believe is bad. And oftentimes those who find themselves walking in such a way of psychological trauma, they are not even at a place of equilibrium. Every time they talk about their offense. They never talk about the good, the volume of good, the overwhelming good. All they can focus on is what they were hurt by. And then they go earth mining, they go digging, and they go unearthing any and everything throughout all of the years that could have affected them. And before you know it, the person who finds themselves psychologically traumatized, they go get a grain of hurt and they allow it to become into a mountain of resentment, and psychologically their mind is now hijacked, and it's hijacked in such a way that they begin to break covenants and agreements. They begin to no longer be faithful. They no longer have self-control. They don't care anything about their demeanor. They wear it on their face. They wear it in their attitudes. They wear it in everything that they can do, because when it's all said and done, that is a full-blown psychological overthrow called the walking wounded. Mentally, the walking wounded can no longer focus. And that's the whole core and episode of Out of Dry Places. The walking wounded gets to a place where their mind literally has become hijacked by some event, by some occurrence, by some act, by some action, and no longer can they even sit in a place, whether it's in fun or whether it's in what's necessary for their lives. There are so many barriers and walls and obstacles are there that no longer allows the walking wounded to be able to focus. They can't give their undivided attention. There are always secondary thoughts and secondary voices that are speaking to them while others are speaking. They can't seem to grab their balance and get their grip, because all the enemy wants them to do is be all about self. It drives the walking wounded into seeing self and nothing else. Everything becomes an episode of me, 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 me. If it's raining, well, why is it raining on me? If somebody is saying something, why are they talking about me? If somebody didn't come or go, well, why is it about me? And when it's all said and done, the mind of the walking wounded can no longer consume anything that's good for them until they feel that they have created or committed an act that brings them into an equilibrium with the one who has offended them. When it comes to this episode of the walking wounded, going deeper and deeper into this downward spiral, the walking wounded now becomes a bitter person. Bitterness seems to leak and spur out of their lives, and it doesn't even have to require anything to happen. It can just take opportunity to begin to just come out. It blurs out of the mouth. It's shown in various ventings and acts of fits, literally, where the bitter person now is starting to come into a physical state where it no longer can control its physical emotions. It's now starting to seep out where people now can see it. Someone pass your way, you roll your eyes, or you murmur under your breath. You begin to find yourself now getting physically exposed because you cannot hide it any longer. It's not just a mental thought now. It's starting to come out in your physical actions, and you don't even realize that not only is it coming out in your physical actions, but it's also affecting your physical state. You start going through all kinds of trauma in your body, trauma that you can't even put your hand on, illnesses, cancers, ulcers, fatigues, mental lapses. Everything begins to wear down on the body because the body can no longer sit under that kind of assault. Your mind cannot be continually running under this kind of weight of heaviness without it now starting to push and push and push on body ailments. Physicians and doctors come to a place where they examine us and we can't even find out what's going on because what we're wearing is so deep in the fabric and the core of our being that oftentimes not even doctors are able to touch this emotional depth of woundedness. The wound is so deep now that the body is starting to cave in. It's starting to take on all of these manifestations that not even pills and medications and doctors can eradicate or remove these kinds of things. That person is really at a place where the only thing that can help is the spirit of genuine forgiveness, where when genuine forgiveness goes forward, when genuine forgiveness becomes released, when genuine forgiveness takes us into that place of godly sorrow, and godly sorrow begins to get into the depths and the deep of our lives, where doctors and nurses and physicians and any kind of medical aid could never treat us. The walk of forgiveness, the words of forgiveness, the heart of forgiveness, the thoughts of forgiveness, it has to literally come into that place of that bitter person. And it's got to work at such levels, deep levels. And what I'm finding out, bitter people are not just bitter about one thing or one person. They carry that bitterness as a badge. Everywhere you go, any circle that you sit in, if it gets to where it's deep, and it's contact and it's probing, that bitterness begins to come out. I don't care where the person find his or herself interacting. It can be the home, it can be the job, it can be the church, it can be friendships, it can be anywhere. That bitter person, all it's got to do is try and get involved in any relationship of deepness, And before you know it, that bitterness will begin to reveal itself. It will begin to talk in such a way of aimless talk. It talks in terms of talk that destroys and it tears down and it causes everything to become quagmired. And when bitter people are around weak people come under that snare of those words, under that snare of that bitterness. And before you know it, the only thing that can turn and curve this person up out of this stage of bitterness is genuine forgiveness. Amen. And where there is no forgiveness, guess what? The bitter person goes into a state of hatred. Hatred is a place whereby you don't show any actions. You're numb, you're null, you're dull. Nothing you say matters. Nothing you seem to care about. Nothing you seem to concern yourself with. If something happens, so what? It's not affecting me. If something is good for you, so what? I don't need it. If something is bad for you and it's what you want to do, leave me alone. I'm grown. And before you know it, this person of hatred, we come to call that the quiet before the storm. The hateful person becomes quiet. Stop believing because a person is quiet, they agree. Stop believing because a person seems to not say something or show anything that they are okay. Hatred is this phenomenon that when it's all said and done, the hateful person gets very, very quiet. The contrast between the hateful person and the angry person is that the angry person can show up and get close and yet have thoughts of this offense. The hateful person, they can show up and no longer care about the offense. All they are doing is sitting there planning their next move. The angered person sometimes struggles coming into the environment. The hateful person cruises into the environment and has to be in the environment so that it can collect its last bit of data, its last bit of information, its last bit of whatever it needs to go into its last state or stage. The hateful person is the person that once it's all said and done, they sit and they get, or they stand, or they go and they come, and when it's all said and done, they concoct themselves in such a way that it appears that there is nothing wrong, but yet they are now planning their last assault. A hateful person is a person where love doesn't mean anything. Peace doesn't mean anything. Joy doesn't mean anything. A hateful person is just at that place where it's the quiet before the storm. I grew up in hurricane country, down in the lower parts of the state of America, the country of America. And what I find is when a hurricane is coming and it's coming into your territory, the environment, I don't care how hot and humid or muggy, I don't care what it was like before the hurricane actually hit. As it got closer and closer and closer, there became this lull. It became this quiet spirit. It became as if everything got resigned to calm. But the truth about it, it was no calm at all. There was about to be such a manifestation, such a coming of sheer disaster, sheer destruction that was going to be targeting that which it was coming after with all of its veracity, with all of its strength and winds, because it was designed to kill, to steal, and destroy. Well, hate and hatefulness has that kind of overture. It's an overture that allows the person to get into a state of calmness, but yet they're sick, yet They are very, very ill. They're ill psychologically. They may even be ill physically, but yet they are constantly bombarded with thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. And these thoughts are never good thoughts. They're always thoughts of how to re-enter to exact a victory. Sometimes for many people, they find leaving is their victory. Sometimes many people find stop doing what they do, quit their job, they quit their marriages, they quit their friendships, they quit their churches, all because they are at this place where it just festers and festers and festers, and nothing, not anything or anybody is able to turn that situation around, simply because that person has become so devastatingly affected by an offense that the offense now has worked down so deep through hurt, through anger, through resentment, through bitterness, through hatred, and now the last manifestation of the walking wounded is a person of rage. A person of rage is a person who will commit sabotage. They will commit homicide. They will commit suicide. A person of rage can get to a place where they can no longer think logically, and their feelings become placeboed. What do I mean by that? They have a feeling about something that has transpired a time ago, and they become so wrapped and so tied and so inculcated with the development of that offense that the new environment that they find themselves in, any little thing can cause a volcanic explosion. There is this phrase that says, there is a straw that can break the camel's back. That's the person who has gotten to the state of rage. That's the person who says, you've gotten on my last nerve. That's the person who can over-respond to something that did not warrant that kind of response. It's generally the person that has become so weighed down with the assignment of destruction, with the assignment of selfishness, with the assignment of me, or everybody is out to get me, or before you know it, the person becomes wrapped up and tied up in a self-agendaed motive. And the self-agendaed motive is the righteousness of self, where self now takes liberty to be able to say, I can pull the plug, I can destroy you, I can destroy it, I can cause what I want to cause for damage, just so that I can now make my final mark. I grew up as a little boy, and I had some friends that we would oftentimes play with together, sports. And this boy, he had a set of parents, like I guess we all do. And his father was a barber, a business owner. And his mother, she worked some other kind of job, I really don't remember. But the barber was this kind of barber. A lot of us, or people in our community, went there to get our haircuts for, if you were male. And the barber, on one occasion, we found out that there was a fire going on at the barber shop. And we had never known this particular man to be a man of insult. He was always this appearing to be kind and decent man. We found out on that day that the barber shop was burning, and the barber shop was burning so bad that it pulled nearly every fire truck in that community onto the scene. By the time we got down there, we were blocks away, but we could see the smoke billowing in the air. And by the time we got somewhat near the place, we started hearing the reverberations of what building was burning. We learned that it was the building of our friend, and it was his father's barber shop that was on fire. Never would we have dreamed or thought of when we began to hear the full episode of what the fire had in its details. The details of the fire was that the barber and his wife were obviously having some interactions over an extended period of time. The details we came to know, but I don't need to give the details of it. But the bottom line was the barber killed his wife and then set the place on fire and made sure that it was burning to the degree that the entire building burned down, whereby there was a homicide and a suicide. The barber also killed himself, whereby in one fit of rage, in one fit of this is what I'm so preoccupied with. I could take a life, I could take my life, and that's the whole chord of the walking wounded. The walking wounded can get to a place where it's headed to hell, to destruction, to death. It's going to lead to nothing that can be good. There are so many people, when I used to go into jails and I would minister in jails, and I would get an opportunity to talk to people while they were in jail, and we would have an opportunity to get to share from time to time. I would find out some of the most horrible stories, and generally the stories ended like this: I don't know what happened. It happened so quickly. But the truth about it, it didn't happen quickly. It happened over a long, extended period of time, where one got offended somewhere back up the road. And because they never dealt with the offense, because they never got healed or cured of that particular wound, then they walked with it, and they went through all of these stages of hurt, anger, resentment, bitterness, hatred, that they came to this final stage of rage, and they committed an act that on a normal day, in their right state of mind, they would have never did it. The chord of the rageful people tend to be this: but I love you, but I love you, but I love you, but I love you, but I love you. And generally, even though they can say they love, yet they killed, yet they destroyed, yet they tore down, yet they did everything that they could do. And the cadence was, but I loved him, but I loved her. And when it's all said and done, that's the strength and the yoke of rage. Rage will make you do a hateful, destructive thing, and yet out of your own mind, with your own thoughts, according to your own person, you still say you loved what you killed. You loved what you destroyed. You loved what you could not see prosper and go forth. And when it's all said and done, that is the casualty and the awesomeness of the walking wounded. It becomes such a phenomenon that when it's all said and done, violence, destruction, division, separation, murmuring, complaining, all of those things they become the saga of the walking wounded. In closing, I want to talk about this last state. I'm on page 119. I want to close with hatred and bitterness. I've already said it's the quiet before the storm. It's when there is a dullness or numbness to what is really affecting the person. The offended person goes around saying they're fine. However, the person is not fine. It seems as if bitterness has literally stolen the very breath from within the person. The walking wounded at this stage is very, very crafty, very, very subtle. This is where violence becomes a part of the aggression. The offended person's quietness does not speak to finding healing, nor does it mean that the person can find agreement or resolve. As a matter of fact, they're not even looking for agreement or resolve. They're going to resolve it their way. The person starts to contemplate, meditate, or think of a plan to ensnare. This is the hatred that's going on. The person becomes resigned from those people or things as if he or she is at peace with them. The person practices peace through avoidance. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Wow. However, the person is truly plotting their demise. He develops plans with malicious intent to destroy. Hatred works best through deception and betrayal. Read about Simeon and Eli, or should I say Levi? Eli being the offspring of Levi. In Genesis chapter 34, verses 1 through 31. Those two boys, they deceived and they betrayed even their father because they were so wounded by what had been committed against their sister that they went and they destroyed an entire city through deception. Hatred unchecked or unresolved turns into the final stage of the walking wounded, which is the stage of rage. The finale of this fortified demonic stronghold is rage. Remember, we said the offense wants to first get a foothold, or gain a foothold, and then it wants to go into a stronghold. It wants to have a fortified place in the person's mind, thoughts, beliefs. It wants to even be fortified in the person's body. How many people thought that because they didn't have anything to live for, or they thought their days were numbered through some type of health concern, they lived recklessly because they didn't believe that they had much time? Hatred is the arrival of the storm that has come to kill, steal, and destroy. The demonic stronghold is ready to accomplish its final mission: death by murder. Rage kills our dreams, visions, goals, callings. It kills our people, and it kills our resources. Rage do not want to leave anything intact. It loves to see failure. It goes towards failure. Rage has nothing to do with manifesting a destiny or a destination or accomplishing a goal or seeing a vision go forward. Rage is there to kill those things. The walking wounded becomes offended and goes from being hurt, angry, resentful, bitter, hateful, and then finally full of rage. Rage kills and then feels sorrow for what it has done. When it becomes sorry for what it has done, you know that's a person that just for a minute they've checked out. Didn't take much time. A life is gone and somebody is asking themselves, what did I do? Rage kills again by continuing to kill others or by committing suicide. Suicide is the taking of self life. Rage acts, listen to this. Rage acts and then thinks. Wow. Wow. It doesn't think and then act. It acts and then it tries to think. And we know if that gets out of place, then we could simply do some things that we could regret later. Rage represents for the offended a total demonic takeover of the spirit, soul, and body. Rage is the culmination of a complete overthrow of the person. The enemy uses the person as if he or she is property of theirs. This is not demonic oppression. This is demonic possession.
Wow.
This is where the person actually becomes possessed by evilness and wickedness. And I'm talking about people who love God. I'm not talking about people on the street corner. This book was written for the church. It's written as a handbook for people who come to church Sundays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursday, whatever your midweek service is. This book is not talking about some street corner person who is struggling with their faith. This book is talking about people who show up in church Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, but they have a cord around their necks. And it's strangling everything out of them that's called life, as if wickedness owns them. There is a difference between oppression and possession. You can be oppressed by others, and you know the difference because it's from without. It never gains its leverage within. Oppressed people can still have decency. They can still live right. Come on, somebody. Oppressed people can still do good. Oppressed people can still have a way of righteousness about their lives. We who are of African American descent in America, we have all too long heard of the stories of oppression. But when oppression breaks through into the life of a person, whereby now that person becomes the cadence of wickedness and evil, no matter by how small measure or how great measure, evil is evil. That person has become possessed. Wow. Now you would think for Christians, once Jesus comes into our hearts and into our lives, he possesses us. We say, we are owned by the Lord. We say we are the house. We are the temple of God. We say God owns our bodies. We say the body is not your own, but it belongs to the Lord. We say all of those things as Bible-believing Christians. And yet, under the trauma of daily life, under the bumping and grinding and interactions with people, something begins to wear at the fabric of our words. Something begins to take the luster off of those words, and it begins to reveal our humanness, and it begins to make us comfortable with acting like humans, all the way to the degree that there is no Zoe life. There is not a striving for a higher plane. There's not a striving for breaking forth and being able to do good when evil is done to you. There's no more accord of being able to break through every bondage and stripe that is being laid up against us. Now all we can do is allow the bondage and the stripe to penetrate deep down inside of us, and then we become the fabricators. Such that our souls, our mind, our wills, and our emotions becomes possessed. This is the ultimate stage of the walking wounded. Maybe at this stage, we should call that person dead man walking. Wow. The spirit of the offended person is dormant. The offended person has long ago died spiritually. The sad part about this person is in many churches today. The person is everywhere. Whether your Sabbath is on Saturday or Sunday, the person gathers somewhere. And yet, spiritually dead. Not responsive to the teachings of their faith. They live in Christian homes. They can be apostles or prophets or evangelists or pastors or teachers or bishops or elders or deacons or ushers or worship leaders, etc. The church can become so wounded that it does not spare its most vital part, its leadership. In the sequel of this book, I have been writing on the walking wounded. This was just a quick overview. If you've read this book, and for those of you who are streaming, if you have not read it, I would say it'd be a good thing to do so, so that you can identify something about yourself, or maybe something about others who appear to be demonstrating any of these symptoms. And then just share this book with them. Just share the principles of it. It's my hope that we can get down to the root cause, spiritual dryness, before it's too late. If there's any fight that needs to come to an end, it's the fight in the local church, where people who are of the same cords and stripes sometimes appear to be one another's greatest enemies. This is the sabotage of the 21st century church, as it was the sabotage of the early church, as it was the sabotage of Cain and Abel. Sisters and brothers finding reason to destroy the work of God. While we believe, as long as God's Spirit is in the earth, it is never too late to find answers to life difficulties. God gives us information and revelation for solving these difficulties. I hope this can become a great guide for bringing dead things back to life. God's resurrection power is designed for raising dead things. If ever we need to see a God that defies the capacity and the capabilities of man, we need to see God where things are dead. I'll close with this. Preachers and teachers and promoters of thoughts, consciousness, promoters of all kinds of information and knowledge, no matter what it is that we promote, it's probably going to be very necessary that in our promotion of these things, we begin to realize that it's God who gives life. And I'm finding out something, that even though man can take life, even though man can destroy hopes and dreams and visions, even though man can be destructive in all of his attempts, I found out that no matter what man does, God is not finished. When man finishes, don't ever equate that to God being done. When man comes to steal, kill, and destroy, don't ever believe that that is final. Because God has given to men to talk to the living. But I don't see no man, no day of the week, going into graveyards and cemeteries on a regular basis, attempting to open up their prosperity teaching, or attempting to stretch out their hands and heal the dead. I don't see no man that sets up in the cemetery and believe that it has an audience of dead, that they now can promote their assignment or their agenda. I don't see no man preaching to the dead. But yet, there is a man that has the power over dead things and dead people. And while man can't preach to dead, God specializes in preaching to dead things. That's why this book starts off with the story in Ezekiel. Ezekiel, can these dry bones live? Ezekiel, can you say something to these dry bones? And Ezekiel had to say, well, God, you know whether these bones can live. Lazarus is dead in the tomb, and Jesus comes to the tomb, and he preaches to the tomb. I don't know of a preacher that wakes up on Sunday morning or through the week and go to the graveyards and the cemeteries and begin to start their sermon. But yet this God that we serve He goes into houses every day where things are dead. Goes on jobs every day where things are dead. Comes into churches every day where things are dead. And God still yet has the power and the authority to raise dead things.
Amen.
The kind of God we serve is not final just because death has come.
Yeah.
The God we serve, he sits back and he patiently waits until death has run its full course, and then God steps in, and right after dead, God brings the life.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
I believe that when it's all said and done, the God that you serve, I don't care what your faith is, the God that we serve, I want you to know, he masters and he specializes in dead things.
Mm-hmm.
When it doesn't look like it's going to work out, when it doesn't appear any good thing will happen, when it looks like your arms are too short, your resources are too short, your faith is too short, your goals are too small, when it looks like it's not going to work, the God that you serve is still able
That's right.
to bring non-existent things into full-fledged, full-blown existence. And this is why, when it's all said and done, we come to talk to those who are in conclaves of spiritual houses, but yet Sunday after Sunday, that individual is dead. What the preacher says rolls off of them as if it's water off of the duck's back. Has nothing to do with whether it's good or bad. The person can't even receive anything because they're just so full of themselves that when it's all said and done, like a hammer, the enemy is going to drop down, and the end of hardness is going to be powdery substance. That's why God says to the hard, or those who live with hardness, he says, there's a day you're going to have to fall on the rock and be broken and be healed and changed. Or there is a day when the rock is going to fall on you and it's going to crush and grind you up into powder, and you are not going to be any use, not for yourself or anybody else. I'm so glad that we've had this chance to talk with those of you that are on the live feed streaming and those of you in the main hall. Please, whatever you do, don't give up on God when things are dead. I don't care if you've got ministries out there, hopes and dreams. I don't care if you have businesses. I don't care if it's your marriage. I don't care if it's your country. I'm telling you this morning, do not give up on your dreams. Wait patiently and allow your God, the God that you have faith in, allow him to speak to you. Thank you so much. For those of you that find value in these times together, drop us something, an email, drop us a faith seed, drop us a thank you, just comment, do a like, do something, because it will allow us to know whether we need to continue in this medium or not. But I'm believing that God is opening up doors for this message to go forward. My name is Dr. Williams. My pleasure to come to you every week, twice a week, on Sunday mornings as well as on Wednesday evenings. Whatever your time zone is, whatever your time frame is, please, by all means, check us out and allow us to do for you what oftentimes you can't find anyone else to do. Encourage you and give you hope for your life. Thank you, and God bless you.
For those